This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. World leaders arrive in Beijing for China's Victory Day parade. Among them, North Korea's Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin, set to share the stage with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. An expert joins us to unpack talk of a new axis of power. Now, not everyone's impressed, though. Taiwan's president warns aggression will fail, citing World War II lessons and today's heightened security risks. And in the markets, gold hits a record high, soaring past $3,500 per ounce. A weaker dollar and expectations of a U.S. interest rate cut making the safe haven an attractive investment. And in corporate shakeups, the CEO of beverage giant Suntory has resigned over a police drug investigation after his home was raided last month. He denies any wrongdoing. Ahead on East Asia tonight, tight security in Beijing, and nothing is left to chance as the city gets ready to hold a massive military parade tomorrow. China is preparing for the final act of a multi-day charm offensive this week, hosting a gathering of allies that have hailed Xi Jinping's vision of a new world order. Now, tomorrow's military parade in Beijing will commemorate 80 years since the end of World War II, the event capping off the largest summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, comprising non-Western nations, including Russia, North Korea, and Iran. It will be Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un's first appearance together in public in what's seen as a show of solidarity against the West. Now, Mr. Kim's train was seen pulling into the Beijing train station just a few hours ago. It's unclear if there will be a separate trilateral meeting away from Tiananmen Square, but Russian media say Mr. Putin and Mr. Kim may sit down for talks. Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin held talks in the Chinese capital ahead of the parade. The Russian leader told his Chinese counterpart that relations were at an unprecedented level. Xi Jinping pledged to work with Moscow for a more just and equitable global governance system.
Я благодарю за теплый прием, оказанный всей нашей делегации. Наше тесное общение отражает стратегический характер российско-китайских связей, которые находятся на беспрецедентном высоком уровне.
中俄双方坚守初心，保持并力，各领域合作取得深刻成果。中方愿同俄方一道努力，支持彼此国家发展振兴，坚定维护公平正义，推动构建更加公正合理的全球治理。
A North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un's visit to China is his first appearance at a major multilateral event in his 14-year rule. But South Korea's intelligence agency says a three-way discussion with Beijing and Moscow is unlikely. CNA's senior correspondent Lim Yeon-suk has more.
A closed-door briefing for lawmakers was held at the National Assembly by South Korea's National Intelligence Service, the NIS. Following that meeting, two lawmakers told reporters it was likely that Kim Jong-un would be interacting with other heads of state when he attends a state reception and cultural performance in Beijing. This would help Kim Jong-un engage in a broader diplomatic event and showcase a more open North Korea. The lawmakers said trilateral talks involving leaders of North Korea, China, and Russia are not expected, as it could send a wrong message to the international community.
북중러 3자가 한 자리에 있을 것이냐라고 하는 것은 내일 일정이 상당히 타이트하다는 점, 그리고 현재 북중러가 공동으로 논의할 사항이 있을지라고 하는 것은 회담 형식보다는 천안문에 북중러 세 지도자가 같이 서는 모습을 과시함으로써 드러내지 않겠느냐.
The NIS said Kim Jong-un could use the trip to pursue several goals, such as, first, restoring better ties with China, which have become somewhat strained in recent years, as North Korea grew closer to Russia, even sending troops to aid Moscow in its war against Ukraine.
두 번째는 중국의 경제적 지원을 견인하고 체제 활로를 모색한다. 세 번째는 러시아 우크라이나 전쟁, 종전 리스크 헤징 등 러시아 편중 외교를 탈피한다. 네 번째, 대북 북미 대화 염두를 두고 중국의 지지 확보 및 미국 태도 변화를 유인하게 하는 것들을 고려하고 있다라고 보고를 했습니다.
The NIS believes Pyongyang is unlikely to hold talks with the U.S., but is leaving the door open. The last time a North Korean leader attended a Chinese military parade was in 1959. That was his grandfather and the North's founder, Kim Il-sung. Kim Jong-un was last in Beijing in 2019 to mark the 70th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries. In Tuesday's briefing to lawmakers, the spy agency also said it believes roughly 2,000 troops out of the 15,000 North Koreans sent to Russia since last fall have died in combat. Ahead of his departure to Beijing, Kim Jong-un visited a North Korean Missile Research Institute to review progress on developing a new engine for its next-generation intercontinental ballistic missile. Analysts say it could be a long-range weapon capable of defeating U.S. missile defenses. Lim Yan-suk, CNA, Seoul.
Okay, now to help us unpack this all, we are joined now by Sung-Min Cho, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science, Sun Kwun Kwan University. Well, thanks, Prof, for joining us this evening. So there's a lot of talk about how President Xi, Putin and Kim all together on that same stage in Beijing. What do you think are some of the main strategic objectives for each of them in terms of trying to present this united front?
Well, of course, their common purpose is to show their unity against the pressure from the West. And then from that perspective, Putin's attendance was well expected. A little surprise was invitation of Kim Jong-un. And I think from Chinese perspective, it is necessary to bring Kim Jong-un when they observe the newly elected the South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. He was engaging with the U.S. More rapidly, more closer than Beijing expected. And then Chinese leaders have been stressed about the growing military cooperation among the U.S., Japan, and South Korea. So seeing all this move, China may feel prompted to invite Kim Jong-un so that it can show the optic of the unity among China, Russia, North Korea, as opposed to U.S., Japan and South Korea.
And when you look at Kim Jong-un's role here, it is his first high-profile appearance on the global stage in some years now. What is his choice of choosing China as well? Tell us about where he sees his leverage and what kind of message is Kim Jong-un trying to send?
There are many multiple purposes here, but as the previous news clips shows, it is about time for North Korea to revive its traditional ties with China, as there has been perception inside and outside China that North Korea is moving too close to Russia. So as there is an ongoing negotiation between Trump and Putin about the end of the war in Ukraine, although it is not within any close prospect that the war will end soon, but that may signal to Kim Jong-un that it's about time that he needs to recover relationship with Beijing. And also during the summit between South Korean President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Trump, there was a discussion about the potential U.S.-North Korea summit. And then for that to happen, Kim Jong-un also needs to make sure that he has close communication with Beijing. So he may have an eye on the possibility of the North Korea and U.S. summit as well.
So in other words, there could be some serious diplomacy in the works here. I mean, it's not confirmed, but if Kim Jong-un, he turns this parade into some kind of a private diplomacy with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, are we looking at the beginnings of a new axis in Asia, or how do you think that would force the U.S. and its partners to sort of rethink their strategy?
I think that's exactly the optic that Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping may want to deliver. But we need to, when we look back, Beijing has been very ambiguous about endorsing North Korea and China relationship. Whenever there is a question about what is China's position on Russia and North Korea military cooperation, Chinese officials always say Russia and North Korea are two sovereign states. Whatever happened between two states is not China's matter. So China maintains some distance from the military cooperation between Russia and North Korea. But this is the first time that China openly embraced two countries together, so that generating the perception that the three countries are working together. But there should be a limit given the historical pattern that with China's ambiguity, and then all this conflicting interest among the three countries.
It's interesting you've mentioned that because there's also the question of actually who holds the most sway, and people will say China carries more weight than Russia or even North Korea. How does that power imbalance play out in terms of shaping their cooperation?
Yes, I think there is a widespread perception that China is growing stronger than Russia after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because Russia has to rely on China for economic survival. So given this growing imbalance between China and Russia, there is a popular assumption that Putin should be dissatisfied with this growing imbalance. And then some people even argue that the US and the West should exploit drive the wedge between China and Russia. Although it may be true that China's influence is growing between the bilateral ties between China and Russia, but Chinese leaders and Russian leaders, they are keenly aware of the Western discussion of driving the wedge between the two countries, or so-called reverse Nixon strategy. So this awareness will help them stick together, and then I think China-Russia partnership will be here to stay for a long time.
Some great analysis there. Thank you so very much, Song-Min Cho, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science, Sung Kyun Kwan University. And later on East Asia Tonight, we will be crossing live to our Beijing correspondent, Tan Si-hui, for the very latest on the parade preparations. Now to North Korea, where a delegation led by the Public Security Minister is reportedly heading for Russia. Our state media KCNA released this video showing Russian embassy officials in Pyongyang seeing off the delegation at the airport. There were no further details on the purpose of the trip. Now, ties between North Korea and Russia have deepened since the war in Ukraine. South Korean and Western intelligence agencies say that Pyongyang sent weapons and deployed thousands of troops to aid Moscow. Seoul says some 2,000 North Korean soldiers have been killed in the conflict. Vietnam marking 80 years since declaring independence with unprecedented celebrations. It's the country's largest ever military showcase. A sense of patriotism filled the parade as some 40,000 troops and civilians gathered in the capital, Hanoi. Vietnamese, decked in red and beaming with pride, waved their national flags high up in the sky. A 2-hour procession also featured Chinese and Russian soldiers marching alongside their Vietnamese counterparts. Festivities centered around the country's achievements, including its economic transformation into a global manufacturing powerhouse. In 1954, Vietnam's victory in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu successfully drove out the French. The former colonial power had refused to recognize the independence proclamation in 1945. Time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China's top car maker faces a bumpy road ahead. We'll tell you why it's likely to miss its sales target. And one of Japan's most recognizable business leaders steps down as CEO over a drugs probe. Hello Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. Well, Roland joins us now with the very latest in business. So it's been all about the SCO summit this whole week. Tell us what was the biggest takeaway from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin.
Well, Telly, the SCO is creating a development bank to cut dollar dependence and to boost economic ties across Central Asia. This marks a win for Beijing, which had wanted to establish the bank as early as 2010.
中方10多年前提出成立开发银行的倡议，这次终于瓜熟蒂落，上合组织将启动这一重要的进程。欧亚地区将增加一个多边合作的平台，这将会有力促进上合组织国家基础设施建设和经济社会的发展。
President Xi Jinping has pledged $1.4 billion in loans over the next 3 years to SCO members on green energy industries. The new bank will likely provide non-US dollar financing so as to help members reduce the risk of sanctions and dollar volatility. The currency of the new SCO bank will likely be yuan. The bank's creation may also give China more influence in global financial governance, and there may be more targeted lending among its members and partners. A rough road ahead for China's biggest electric vehicle maker, BYD's total sales rose just 0.1% in August from a year ago, while its biggest rival, Geely, saw a 38% increase the same month. BYD's rise to the top of the world's biggest auto market has been underpinned by aggressive discounting. But Beijing wants to stamp out the brutal price war, which they say threatens the long-term health of the industry. Now, without relying on discounts, BYD will enter the peak sales season in September and October, fending off rivals that are offering sleek, tech-focused models at similar price points. Stripping out overseas and commercial deliveries, BYD's domestic sales fell almost 15% last month. Still remains by far the most popular EV brand in China. Its deliveries this year are 10 times higher than XPeng and Li Auto. But those smaller brands are putting up a fierce fight. Leap Motor and XPeng seeing record sales last month. All eyes now on whether BYD can hit its ambitious goal of selling 5.5 million vehicles this year. Now, it kept the target despite reporting a 30% drop in second quarter profit. To hit the goal, BYD must deliver more than 2.6 million units in the final 4 months of the year. Industry Watch is saying it's not a question of whether it'll miss the target, but by how much. Facing breakneck competition at home, Chinese EV makers are keenly exploring overseas markets. Some are rushing to set up production in Malaysia to tap into growing demand. BYD announcing plans to open its first plant next year, joining the likes of Leap Motor and Chery. Its factory in Perak will reassemble EVs from vehicle kits, which leads to lower sticker prices than fully assembled and exported from China. A startup, Leap Motor, is partnering with Stellantis to set up its Kedah factory to assemble the C10 EV. Other Chinese car makers such as XPeng and GAC also planning production plants in Malaysia. Malaysia is positioning itself as a manufacturing hub for automakers looking to export to ASEAN countries and beyond. Domestically, it has set an ambitious roadmap for an 80% EV adoption by 2050, up from the current 5%. Malaysia has reported more than $6 billion in EV-related foreign direct investments over the past 3 years, and these are bringing in jobs and new tech, but also putting pressure on national players like Proton. It's opening its first EV plant this week. Sales have gone up since its first EV launched in December, but it still lags behind BYD. A Japanese beverage group Suntory Holdings says its CEO Takeshi Ninami has resigned following a police investigation into his purchase of a supplement that may have been illegal. 66-year-old Ninami chairs a powerful business lobby and has served as economic advisor to several Japanese prime ministers and was reportedly suspected of importing products containing THC. That's an active ingredient in cannabis from the US. The police raided his house last month, but no illegal drugs were found. Mr. Ninami reportedly told police he thought the supplement was a legal product. A graduate of Harvard Business School, he is the first head of Suntory from outside the founding family. The company president lauding Ninami as bold, decisive leader who expanded revenues and profits. Shares of Suntory Beverage and Food rally nearly 3% today before reports that the CEO is stepping down. After gold set a new benchmark at auction in London on Monday, well, today's spot price pushed through the record $3,500 an ounce. Silver is also at a 14-year high. So what's driving the surge, and can it last? As a non-yielding asset, gold tends to benefit when expected real rates fall. A softer dollar and growing expectations of a Fed cut at this month's meeting supported bullion. Friday's U.S. personal consumption expenditures inflation data also aligned with those forecasts. Market focus has also turned to central bank independence. Now, President Trump's attempt to remove Fed Governor Lisa Cook, alongside public pressure on Chair Jerome Powell, has unsettled some investors. Analysts say perceived risks to institutional credibility can raise demand for safe haven assets such as gold. Official sector purchases remains a medium-term pillar. Recent World Gold Council updates point to continued central bank buying this year, including additional purchases by the People's Bank of China in July. At the end of July, a U.S. customs ruling prompted concern that common bullion bars could fall under import tariffs, briefly disrupting shipments. The White House later indicated that gold bars would not be subject to tariffs, easing those concerns. Silver's advance reflects both safe haven flows and its own industrial role, with prices now back above levels last seen in 2011. So gold's latest leg higher was driven by currency moves, policy expectations, and a degree of institutional risk hedging. Whether the rally extends will hinge on incoming U.S. data and the Fed's decision later this month. For more, Chris Weston, head of research from Pepperstone, explained why central banks have been steadily buying gold this year.
When central banks are buying on behalf of governments and various factors to change their reserves, a lot of the data does come out once a month. I mean, China's the big one we always look at very closely, and the data comes out once a month, and we haven't got that one yet, so we'll be watching that one very closely. But they were insatiable buyers, and they've been increasing their reserves, gold as a percentage of their total reserves, and that sort of came out of the news last few months. But, you know, go back to where we were April, May, that's what a lot of people were talking about as the big driver of the gold price. So we're waiting for data to suggest that they're back looking to increase gold as their reserves. But you've got a lot of these emerging market nations like Poland, Turkey, they've been big accumulators of gold as well. And it's not obviously the big players like the ECB and the Bank of England and the Bank of Japan. It's the emerging market central banks that I think have really been looking to do that. And I think there was a sort of a perception as we went through, Q1 of this year and certainly of last year as well, that, if you were an emerging market nation, that wasn't so friendly with the US, why would it makes sense to increase gold as a percentage of reserves in case Trump decided that he wanted to pull to do something similar to what we saw with Putin, where they obviously looked at their reserves there. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but I think it made a lot of sense for these emerging market nations to do so and push up their the gold reserves as a percentage of their total reserves.
And that's your business update at this hour. We'll tell you.
Thanks, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, tight security in Beijing and nothing is left to chance as the capital gears up for a massive military parade to mark the end of World War II. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines you are following. World leaders arrive in Beijing for China's Victory Day parade. Among them, North Korea's Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin, set to share the stage with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. And ahead of tomorrow's parade, security measures have been ramped up in Beijing as the military prepares to put fighter jets and military hardware on display. And Taiwan's president warns aggression will fail. His comment comes as Taipei and Beijing trade accusations over their competing World War II narratives. Well, let's stay with that story. Taiwan President William Lai, one day before China's mass military parade, pointing to lessons from World War II. Well, Mr. Lai told Defense Ministry officers earlier today that the current security environment is more severe than ever because of what he called Beijing's high-intensity military activities around the Taiwan Strait in recent years. And Mr. Lai's comments come as the two sides trade accusations over their competing World War II narratives. Taiwan has banned officials from attending China's military parade, but ignoring the ban is a former chairwoman of the opposition party, Kuomintang, who arrived in Beijing yesterday. The island has threatened punishment for people ignoring the ban, such as the suspension of pensions for defense and diplomatic officials, both current and former. Now, as we've been reporting, Russian President Vladimir Putin says that relations with China are at a, quote, unprecedented level. Mr. Putin held talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing today ahead of a military parade tomorrow. For more, we are joined now by CNA's Tan Sihui live in Beijing. Sihui, first up, what did the two leaders talk about, and how does Mr. Putin's participation in the Victory Day parade reinforce their political messaging?
Well, there's huge anticipation about world leaders coming here to Beijing, and top of that guest list is Russian President Vladimir Putin, and he is here for the Victory Day parade just days after his informal meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where Mr. Xi had called on a new global security and economic order prioritizing global South countries. Now, here in Beijing, now both leaders have met Mr. Putin, calling ties with China and Russia unprecedented, and Mr. Xi calling Mr. Putin an old friend. Now, let's take a listen to that exchange.
Память о боевом братстве, доверие и взаимовыручка, твердость в защите общих интересов легли в основу отношений всеобъемлющего партнерства и стратегического взаимодействия между Россией и Китаем в новую эпоху. Мы были всегда вместе тогда, мы остаемся вместе и сейчас.
Well, China has been accused by NATO and G7 of supplying weapons to Russia for the Russian-Ukraine war, which China has denied. But analysts have said that regardless, China and Russia have continued their close ties. And the fact that Mr. Putin is here in Beijing, well, it recognizes the added weight to the fact that he is here and shows their close partnership. Now, he is among more than 20 heads of states that are here in Beijing. Now, the next one, we will be expecting to see North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He's said to be in a armored train, and he's taking a 20-hour ride to Beijing from North Korea. And he is the first North Korean leader to be attending a Chinese military parade since 1959. Now, other heads of states that are here, there is a strong Southeast Asian presence as well. We will see Malaysian head of state as well as Myanmar as well as Vietnam. But unfortunately, Indonesia's president has had to have had a last-minute pull-out because of deadly clashes and protests in his country. Now, as we speak, Chinese president at the Great Hall of the People have also met Turkmen president as well as Iranian president. But notably absent are America's leaders as well as the major European Union leaders. Now, analysts are saying that they are unlikely to want to endorse or legitimize China's military strength and assertiveness, especially in the region amid ongoing tensions in South China Sea as well as the Taiwan Straits.
And so, the parade set to kick off at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The preparations for the parade must be epic. So walk us through it.
Absolutely epic, as you've said. Now, the roads are going to be closed off. Now, including this one, parts of roads all around Beijing could be closed off. This one, just right near our hotel, we're putting up at a hotel because our office, the road is being closed off from 9 p.m. tonight. And so we're putting up at a hotel that's close to the media center so we can walk over there early in the morning tomorrow. As you can tell, there are bridges right there. Officials are already patrolling all the bridges near Beijing and Tiananmen Square. We've also seen officials patrolling the roads. Our office was closed off. It was being checked, thoroughly checked by officers as well as sniffer dogs, and it has been closed off. Now, we talked to residents about the disruptions, even as authorities say they will try to minimize as much disruptions to residents. We spoke with them, and we also talked about some of the preparations that have gone on over the last few days. Driving around Beijing, it's clear that final preparations for the September 3rd military parade are in full swing. The area around Tiananmen Square, the heart of all the action, we can already see audience stands and camera positions all in place. Flower displays and other decorations have also gone up in the city center. Many snapping photos now before roads in the vicinity close ahead of the parade. Trains will also skip stops in this part of town. Chang'an Avenue is the main boulevard that leads to Tiananmen. And this is where troops will line up and military hardware will roll through. Now, along this route, buildings such as shopping malls and offices will face strict security requirements. Bags have to be scanned, and everyone has to pass through metal detectors to enter. Many buildings off limits from September 1st, with items deemed dangerous, including hairspray and scissors, banned from the premises till after the parade.
因为那个是国家大事嘛。那我那天不方便，我就不去那边，我就在家里看就好了。
哦，对，会封路。但是我们因为上一次阅兵的时候，我们也是从那儿看的，所以这次也可以。
With many world leaders set to attend, the stakes are high. Beijing residents have faced disruptions over many weekends in August as large-scale rehearsals took place in the city, also giving them a glimpse of what to expect. This parade square is about an hour's drive away from Tiananmen Square, where the big parade is set to happen, and it is just one of the sites where we see all the preparatory work. Tens of thousands of people and hundreds of aircraft mobilized to be inspected by Chinese President Xi Jinping and watched by millions at home and abroad. A ban on drones, kites, balloons, and other objects that could affect flight safety is also in place in many districts. All of our equipment have been thoroughly checked for the parade, including this camera that I'm currently using. It will be used at the parade. All thoroughly checked. It's been given a sticker. Even power banks have to be checked. And media, like myself, will have an early call time at 2:45 a.m. in the morning. So I tell you, it will be a long day ahead.
2:45, wow. It is rare, Sihui, for China to stage military parades on such a scale. So I imagine there's a lot we can expect to see.
A lot to see, definitely. A 17-minute long parade. Tens of thousands of troops will be marching at the parade, which President Xi Jinping will inspect. We're also expecting to see some new generation military hardware, hypersonic precision weapons, new tanks, jets, as well as fighter jets we will be seeing at the parade. Analysts are saying that this is really a show of a growing military strength. Authorities themselves have said that these new weapons are not just for display, they can also be activated in times of war.
So I think China would like to make use of this opportunity to showcase that it is a force for good, a just military, and a stabilizing force internationally, especially since January this year when Mr. Trump came to power in the US. So that's a very broad overview of what we can expect to see this time.
The messaging will be one about how the PRC is a force for good, how it's standing up to fascism, how it's standing up to bullying. Now, that, of course, has implicit messaging about how the PRC wants to position itself vis-a-vis the United States, as it's couching the US now as this sort of destabilizer. So I think that element will be quite strong. I think the emphasis on seeking unity, as the CCP claims it to be.
So the display is not really just for an international audience, it's also for a domestic audience. And in the run-up to the military parade, there have been special exhibitions at national museums to really educate the public about the World War II atrocities. And also there have been movies that have been drumming up this World War II occasion, such as Dead to Rights, about the Nanjing massacre. Now, high school students across the country have also been encouraged to stay at home to watch the parade, and they will be asked to write a report after that about their feelings.
Right, so I know you've got a very early start tomorrow, so I'm just going to leave you now so that you can get a bit of rest there. Thanks so much. CNA's Tan Sihui, live in Beijing. Well, the military parade at Beijing's Tiananmen Square is expected to be one of China's largest in recent years. Defense analysts we spoke with told us about the military hardware they will be looking out for tomorrow.
So military parades are still the same function as spanks on a predator. It is a form of deterrence. Military parade is an opportunity for countries to showcase their military capabilities without being too overt about it. If you were to look at the last parade that they had, that was when they displayed some of their latest intercontinental ballistic missiles, some of which are able to hit the continental United States.
记者从中国人民抗日战争暨世界北京天安门地区举行了纪念中国人民抗日战争暨世界反法西斯上第一次综合演练，包括纪念大会仪式等内容，重点磨合了纪念大会。
In my years of studying history, military history especially, I have never seen a country modernize its military as fast as China. So I think this is the kind of reflection that you're going to be seeing in the parade. A lot more strategic systems, a lot more up-to-date modern systems that are suited for the battlefield today, including drones, anti-drone equipment, unmanned systems. So one of the military hardware that I'll be looking at very closely is this submarine-launched ballistic missile known as a JL-3. We know that it exists, but China has not really publicly displayed this weapon in the military parade before. And this weapon is very important because it not only has a range of more than 10,000 kilometers, it is able to take on multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. But most importantly, it can be launched from a submarine, which changes the calculations on how they deal with a nuclear power like the US. Other than that, I will be looking out for unmanned aerial vehicles that are going to be like the loyal wingmen. These are UAVs that are not just used for observation or strike. These are UAVs that with actual air combat capabilities, that will be able to complement some of the air combat operations taken on by the pilots today.
The U.S. thinks China is very powerful. China wants to be powerful relative to the U.S. Xi Jinping has said he wants the PLA to be a world-class military by mid-century. But in reality, despite some recent advances in power projection capability, the most important audience for Chinese power are those within the Asia-Pacific. And of those, the most important ones are Taiwan and Japan. And to a lesser extent, the remainder of the American allies, Australia, Korea, Philippines, and Thailand.
We are living in an era where China has actually exceeded the Americans in terms of certain metrics. For example, they now have a lot more warships than the Americans have. They already have more troops than any country on Earth. China is very keen to show that it has the ability to defend itself. It has the military hardware to back up its rhetoric, and it will not be broken up by external powers, especially with regards to the unification with Taiwan. To be frank, with the current capabilities that they have, the Chinese are not able to take Taiwan yet. Yeah, the invasion of Taiwan will require the dispensing of amphibious assault ships, very close coordination with air support elements, and most importantly, a very network warfare kind of force. We have yet to see evidence of China being able to work as a network force, capable of hitting Taiwan in a cohesive manner, as cohesive as the Western armies have done in exercises.
The most significant impediment to judging the PLA as a powerful military is that it has no combat experience for almost a half of a century. The gap between the United States military capabilities and that of China is growing over the last 25 years because the United States was involved in 2 wars for that period of time. And irrespective of what we think about the wars, when you fight wars, generally you get better at fighting wars. And so the PLA has no relevant combat experience.
There is a bit of a renaissance on the arms race in the region. In China, the uncertainty that China has caused to this part of the world is a major factor that has driven this. And as China is modernizing, I think the countries around China are now modernizing almost as fast, if not faster than China has done.
Singapore Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim-yong visited an accelerator for early-stage startups in Shenzhen as part of his 5-day working visit to China. The Shenzhen Inox Academy supports tech founders and builds a community for new ventures. Senior Minister of State for Trade and Industry Lau Yan-ling, who is accompanying DPM Gan on the visit, says that Singapore welcomes innovative Chinese companies. In her Facebook post, she says they can use Singapore as a base to expand internationally and tap on Southeast Asia's potential. DPM Gan also attended a reception meeting Singaporeans who are exploring new opportunities in Shenzhen. Coming up on the bulletin, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong begins his official visit to New Delhi at the invitation of his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi. And Japan's rice prices falling for the first time in 3 weeks, amid concerns that the heat wave blanketing the country could jeopardize this year's harvest. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong begins his official visit to New Delhi today, his first trip to India as head of government. Now, he's visiting at the invitation of his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi. Well, this year also marks 60 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Rebecca Mateo has more.
Over 6 decades, Singapore and India have built a strong friendship, but the ties could face fresh tests as both countries navigate rising global trade tensions and economic uncertainties. Some of India's key exports to the US, such as garments, gems and jewelry, have been hit with 50% tariffs. That's among the highest duties imposed by Washington. Observers say amid the shifting geopolitical landscape, strengthening Singapore-India trade relations could prove more important than ever.
Countries are very keen to diversify and reinforce supply chains that already exist and develop new supply chains as well. And this is where India and Singapore can actually, develop their relationships well. Because apart from investments, apart from trade, Singapore and India have also links in terms of food security concerns as well. Rice is important from India, wheat could be important from India.
There are already signs that the two countries are looking to deepen cooperation in several key areas. During Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim-yong's recent trip to India, leaders talked about cross-border data flows and training for sectors like semiconductors, maintenance, repair and overhaul. They have also agreed to work more closely in areas such as digitalization, healthcare, advanced manufacturing and connectivity. As Associate Professor Iqbal says, Singapore and India share common interests that's built on a strong foundation of bilateral ties.
So there are broader factors that actually are bringing these two together. We can talk about the semiconductor industry, we can talk about other sectors as well. But the key thing is that India is looking to develop its economy, It needs help in developing the advanced manufacturing sector. It also is looking to work with Singapore in developing its skills sector as well. And this is where Singapore brings something to the table as well.
Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's trip could build on this momentum, with both sides showing strong commitment to deepen ties in these key areas. In New Delhi, he will call on Indian President Draupadi Murmu and meet with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He is also set to meet with other government leaders and business leaders, as well as Singaporeans here. Rebecca Mateo, CNA, New Delhi.
There has been intensifying criticism against the security response to deadly protests in Indonesia. Student bodies of 2 universities in Bandung City are accusing the national police of firing tear gas canisters into crowds near their campuses on Monday. Well, the Student Council of the Islamic University of Bandung, or UNISBA, alleging that security forces, quote, brutally attacked the campus in an attempt to silence dissent. The provincial police reacted by saying that they did not enter campus and clarified that security forces were trying to break up non-student protesters seeking protection on university grounds. The remarks are piling on international rights groups' scrutiny of Indonesia's security response to those protests. The United Nations and Human Rights Watch are calling for a probe into the alleged use of disproportionate force. Indonesian Commission for the Disappeared and Victims of Violence have reported at least 20 people missing following the violent protests. Police have confirmed that some 1,240 people have been arrested since 25th of August. Well, at least 8 people were killed in violent protests after public anger over enhanced privileges for parliament members. President Prabowo Subianto has since revoked a number of perks and ordered security forces to take firm action against what he sees as unlawful acts. Well, Japan's rice prices fell for the first time in 3 weeks last month. That's according to the country's agriculture ministry. The average price of a 5-kilo sack came in at about $26 in the second last week of August, down more than 0.5% from the week before. This as rice from government stockpiles made its way to supermarket shelves. Agriculture Minister Koizumi Shinjiro says that he expects rice prices to stabilize if rice growth continues as projected. But the country's record-breaking summer heat could jeopardize the harvest. Meanwhile, Japan says it will increase its import of U.S. rice within its own duty-free limit. Japan maintains a cap of 770,000 tons of tariff-free rice imports, of which just under half came from the U.S. last year. Any increase to the U.S.'s quota will come at the expense of imports from other countries, such as Thailand, Australia, and China. And that wraps up East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia, and you can always find us on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.